My Haunted Life, Bath Night, written by Doctor Gallow. I couldn't tell you for sure whether or not my old house on Kilmurray Gardens was haunted. Of course, I saw things from time to time, and my mother claimed to as well. Were they ghosts? I don't know. I remember some of the things very vividly, but memory can be unreliable, and it was such a long time ago. It certainly wasn't an old house, steeped in draconian mysteries or long dark shadows. It was a very modest but relatively new build on what the townsfolk called the electric scheme. It had been one of the first to have electric streetlights, long before I was born, but the name had stuck. I think people still call it that to this day. It was small, too. There wasn't much room for me and my mother, let alone any unwanted guests from the other side. There were 2 floors, but it was an oddly narrow house. The rooms were tiny. Nonetheless, there were times I was sure we were not alone. We had several cats over the years, but none stayed. They would all have these strange outbursts of hostility, not towards us, but sometimes to an object like a cup or a book, or sometimes an empty space in a room. They would hiss and growl as if to warn something away, the sort of sounds that they make at each other when one cat is unwelcome. Neither my mother nor myself dared go near them in that state. They were wild and terrifying. When whichever cat had finished its weird, angry little tirade at seemingly nothing, they would go back to purring and grooming themselves as if nothing had happened. My mother would be too freaked out to keep it by that point, though. So off went Judy, Gizmo, Mayo, and Chuffs to new homes, and without much upset. They were never part of the family for long enough for us to get very attached. We had no shower unit. Our bathroom upstairs was literally that. A room with a toilet, a sink, and a metal bath that sat on 4 legs and one of those things that you stick on both the hot and cold taps that has a shower nozzle attached to it. They were always made of thick rubber, so it was impossible to tell if the water was scalding or freezing until it hit you in the face. Either way, there were a lot of yelps. My mother used to let me mess around with it for a bit, before it was time for her to wash my hair. I used to blast the mounds of floating bubble bath foam with it as if I was Triton or Neptune, wrathfully melting icebergs in my tiny ocean. Eventually, I would get bored and turn it on myself and let the water wash over my face until Mother came in. I'd shouted to tell her that I was ready. I'd gotten so bored that night that I'd actually lathered up the shampoo in my hair myself, and badly. The foam had run down over my eyes, so I knew that if I were to open them, I would face certain stinging doom. The shower thing was pumping hot water into the bath near my toes, and it felt good. So I just waited. Shortly, I heard the door creak, and in a moment, her hands were on my scalp and in my hair, scrubbing gently. I used to love that part. I don't think anything in my adult life has ever relaxed me as much as my mom washing my hair for me. I heard the phone start to ring, and that put an end to my short moment of bliss. We had a landline phone. It wasn't so old-fashioned that it had a rotary dial, but mobile phones weren't common at all when I was growing up. Auntie Val used to call us every Sunday night, which, coincidentally, was always bath night too. I don't know if she'd rang early that night or I'd had my bath late, but either way, my lovely, relaxing hair wash was about to come to an abrupt halt. The phone was downstairs. It rang once, twice, 3 times. And my mother just kept scrubbing my head. It wasn't like her to ignore the phone, but who was I to argue? Then, the ringing stopped, and I heard a muffled voice. I could tell it was my mother's. She shouted then that my Auntie Val was on the phone, and that she'd be up in 5 minutes. The fingers that were embedded in the curls of my hair tightened a little, stretching the skin of my scalp, and that's when I started to scream. The next few minutes were a bit of a blur, or perhaps I just don't remember them that clearly. I was out of the bath soon and wrapped up in my mother's arms, drying off by the fire. I remember eating some sort of pudding that I thought was butterscotch. I don't remember her being angry with me, but I have a feeling she didn't take what had happened very seriously. In spite of her telling me occasionally she'd seen odd things herself, she'd often put my experiences down to me watching too many horror movies. Which was her fault, of course, because she let me watch them. We talked about it years later after I had become an adult, and she had gotten decidedly more gray. She didn't remember the flavor of the pudding either, but she remembered a few other more important things. She remembered hearing my screams and running up the stairs. She remembered Auntie Val racing round to the house and banging on the front door to find out what the hell had been going on, because she'd heard my screaming over the phone. It was a funny old thing, though, she'd told me. She couldn't work out why I'd gotten out of the bath before chaos erupted. I told her that I hadn't. I'd been in the bath waiting for her the whole time. But I must have, she told me, because when she got to the top of the stairs, there were wet footprints all the way down the landing carpet that led from the bathroom and stopped in front of the wall at the end of the house. She couldn't figure out how I'd managed to get back in the bath and leave a single trail going away from it. You must have walked backwards, she said. Now, come to think of it, she said, they were big footprints for such a little girl.
Welcome back. I've got some jobs ready for you.